We bring on Adam Silver, 11 years as the NBA commissioner. So let's start with the good stuff. International expansion, China and Africa. You have a new CBA for 7 years. You just signed a massive TV deal. I like the NBA Cup. I'm a distracted consumer. If the court's purple, I know it matters. I like it. I think it works. So there's a lot of good here, more good than bad. But I'm gonna set this question up because this is something I struggle with. I'm a consumer and I'm distracted. I'm on my phone as much as TV. So I have been watching Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. They feel like bird and magic because I am viscerally connected to them via college. This is why studios do sequels. I know the actors. Zach Edey, I really like watching him play. He's having a very nice rookie season. But I know him because Matt Painter and Purdue is a big-time program. It would be reductionist to say he's succeeding because he's big. He's succeeding because of what Purdue did. And not only that, Commissioner, but I got to watch the growth. So I am emotionally committed to Zach Edey. I think your heart was in the right place with the G League. But it hides players from me that I want to grow with. Is there an argument to be made that college basketball, I feel like it's not that it's marginalized, but it's not as big as it could be. It could be such a microwave for your stars. And the league doesn't see it that way. Is that a fair criticism?
I don't think it's a fair criticism because we do see it that way, and we're doing everything we can to build college basketball. I mean, let me take a few steps back. Like, first of all, in terms of the G League, most of the G League players are either international players who didn't play in college or former college players. In fact, we had a program called Team Ignite that Condoleezza Rice recommended we create. There was an NCAA commission, and you'll recall pre-collectives and NIL money, President Obama criticized us, and then the NCAA had a commission and said there should be a track, a pro track into the NBA, because it was unfair that the only opportunity for these young players was to play without being paid in college. So we had already had the G League, but then we created this program called Team Ignite, where for a select few high school players, if they wanted the opportunity to get paid and then come into the NBA, they could play in that program. But even then, we recognized that compared to the facilities, the conditions at the top D1 programs, even though we were paying them and they couldn't have been paid at that point, they were still better off playing at Kentucky or Louisville or Duke or USC or wherever else. And so once the NIL and collective money came in, we actually shut down the Team Ignite. We still have the G League. And the last thing we want to do is take top prospects who would otherwise be going to school, take Cooper Flagg at Duke. We'd rather he be there than be playing in the NBA right now or be playing in the G League. We want those players to develop. So I think there's a misnomer to the extent that you or others feel that we're not supportive of college basketball. I'm personally a huge college basketball fan. Charlie Baker, the former governor of Massachusetts, who's now head of the NCAA, he and I have been meeting a lot to talk about collectively what we can do to better develop young American players, which clearly has to begin before they get to college or the NBA. So, but we are the league of the WNBA too. And so I pay a lot of attention to Caitlin Clark and the star players that are emerging in the WNBA and who are coming from college. And whether it's Angel or Caitlin or Juju now, and these players come into the WNBA as, built fully, multi-dimensional stars that people are familiar with, like it was in the old days in the NBA. We love that. The problem is, like so many things in life, I'm not sure we can turn the clock back on that type of development. I will say it's positive. Putting aside, I think there's some issues that need to be addressed in terms of the NIL system and the collectives. It seems like nobody's really happy with it right now in terms of the competitive landscape.
Right.
I think it's positive that those players are able to be paid. And if they're able to be paid, particularly the players that are on the margin of whether they or not they would be lottery picks or first-round draft picks, they now have a huge incentive to stay in school because they're not only can get the further development, but they can get paid as well.
Here's something that I addressed with David Stern, and I'll address it with you too. I think trades are good for sports. If you look at the best teams in the NBA right now, Oklahoma City, Cleveland, and Boston, They have smart front offices that have drafted and developed well. They can occasionally make a Donovan Mitchell move or a Porzingis move or a Drew Holiday, but those teams have drafted and developed well, and they're being rewarded for it. Dallas drafted Luka. They can go get Kyrie, but Luka's the star. The NBA gets a little too caught up. If you take LeBron out, let's just take LeBron out. He is the historic outlier. Even Kevin Durant, Warriors won before him, Warriors won after him, is that I think the league sometimes is too concerned with trades. If Jimmy Butler, who's a good player, maybe not a superstar anymore, went to Oklahoma City, I would want to watch them more. Or Golden State, I would want to. That the league sometimes, to protect the small markets, let's not worry too much about that. Let's just let players move, because the sense that it ruins the league or creates a competitive balance outside of LeBron, it really doesn't. Most of the great teams in this league historically have always been draft and develop, build a core, and then sprinkle in some good players via trades.
I don't think it's an accident that we've had 6 different teams over the last 6 years that have won championships. And at the end of the day, we sell competition. And I hear you. It sounds like you're making an argument for dynasties to a certain extent, that we should do more to allow a great player to go to an already great team or an already very good team. The problem is that it's zero-sum. The players are going to go somewhere. That's the great news. All the top-tier players are going to play in the NBA, and that there is a correlation. It's far from perfect, but there's a correlation between what players make and their performance on the floor. And so what we've done, and I understand your point of view over time, is while we have a soft cap system, it's become harder, and it has been more difficult once you have a fully loaded team to then add a great player on top of that. And to your point, if Kevin Durant couldn't have gone to Golden State from Oklahoma City when he did, the team he had gone to would have almost by definition, if it weren't already a great team, would have become a great team. And for us, we think that's better league-wide in terms of creating more competition. I mean, we're coming off a season last year, and it's continued this year, where I think we have more competitive teams than any time in league history. And to your point, the fact that tomorrow night, Cleveland and Oklahoma City are playing yet again.
Yeah.
Fantastic build-up for that game, incredible competition. We just got to remember, at the end of the day, that's what we're selling. I mean, I think that's part of the reason for the enormous success of the NFL, this any given Sunday notion, that nobody thinks twice. If the Packers are in the Super Bowl, there's no bemoaning that it's a small market whatsoever. And I think our league, it's true that if you look back on, the first 60 years of our league, it seemed David Stern joked, when he came into the league, I thought the job was you went back and forth from Boston to LA every year, and one of the teams got the rings. And I think the fact that now we're selling competition in every market, and that in terms of from a television standpoint too, that whether it's Oklahoma City, whether it's San Antonio, whether it's Salt Lake City, that those teams are in a position, when well managed, to compete in the same way the large markets can. And by the way, I mean, it's not just money. I mean, players choose markets based on, climate, taxes.
Sure.
Some like big cities, some like small cities.
Yeah.
But I think on balance, this is a much better system for a 30-team league.
I'm going to throw this at you. I said this the other day about the aesthetic of the NBA. It's a bit homogenous, a little cookie cutter. And I said, listen, I don't mind three-pointers, but if the NFL was just, you could run the ball and throw bombs. No layering, no drag routes, no tight end screen. It was just run it or bombs. Optically, it's not as fascinating. And I love the three-pointer. But and this, you're a pretty progressive thinker, I think. Athletes are better. Wemby can pull up and cross you over on a dribble and shoot. They couldn't do that 10 years ago. And the truth is, because your players are so gifted and it's such a global pool, the three-pointer is too easy. And I have simply said, I would put the three-pointer, I would have it go into the bench about 6 feet up, eliminate the corner. I'd bring back the hand check. I do like physicality. Your athletes are so great, it's become too easy to hit it. And the optics on it are repetitive. I think there's numbers, ratings that prove people are, they like layers and power forwards and physicality and not just dunks and threes. What do you do to solve that? Because I think you've engaged with people and acknowledged it can be a bit repetitive. It is a bit of an issue. What do we do to change it?
The hardest question is the last one you asked. What do we do to change it? I agree to the extent that you start to see very similar offenses around the league. Teams have brands, teams have identity. Joe Dumars is a colleague now at the league office, the Bad Boys, et cetera. I think, the Showtime Lakers. So I recognize that to the extent that offenses start to look very similar, we lose that. At the same time, the league is going through a transformation. Just as you said, players like Victor Wembanyama, players like, Jokic are doing things big men never did historically. I mean, It wasn't that long ago, Colin. You'll remember that conversations you had with David Stern, we would bemoan the lack of skill among some players, that there was a sense there was too much physicality around the game.
Yes.
That the play under the basket, that you would have, the Hack-a-Shack era. There were big men that just couldn't shoot free throws. There are no big men anymore who can't shoot. Right. Free throws, just as one comparable from generation to generation, have never been higher. So I think we just got to be careful. Like, the one thing I want to do is, I don't want to sort of knee-jerk move the three-point line. We're sort of going through a process now, seeing how these players are adapting to the new rules and figuring out if whatever changes we should make. I mean, to be honest, I wish it were as simple as just moving the three-point line back, because then we would just do it. I mean, part of the concern from the basketball folks is that if you move the three-point line back, you'll end up sort of just clogging up, the sort of the area under the basket. And that's not such attractive basketball either. I think this is doable. I think by examining the game and sort of seeing where it's going, I mean, it frustrates me a little as well, because it's obviously you're representative of what a fair number of people are saying about the game. And I watch it night in, night out, and we're seeing some of the most incredible athleticism and skill in the history of this league. Again, Victor Wembanyama. But I think you're also saying, too, that if we move the three-point line back and what we ended up with was Victor Wembanyama standing under the basket the whole time and just waiting to dunk, that wouldn't be interesting either.
Right.
So one, I assure you, we are on it. I think it's a very fixable issue. I mean, it's, we've gone from, I always tell the story, like Bob Cousy, who, I don't know, he's around 95 years old, still stays in touch with me. And he'll call me after watching a game and say, I'm so frustrated because the commentators think that what these players are doing, let's say from 28 feet or 30 feet, and seemingly just flicking the ball up with their wrists and swishing these three-pointers, that somehow that's easy. He said, the skill level is incredible. But he'll also say, I think we all want to see diversity in the offenses. But by the way, one other thing I'll just throw in, I don't think the players are getting enough credit for playing the style of defense they're playing now as well. So it's an incredible game. I know you love the game. It's, the number one participation sport in the United States. You mentioned Caitlin Clark. It's incredible to see what the women are now doing on the floor and the amount of young girls who are playing this game. So as stewards of the game, Joe Dumars leads our competition committee here. We will tweak it. We will correct those issues.
So years ago, I had President Barack Obama on a couple of times, and one of the things I offered him, I said, you're the first president in my life that's had to deal with social media and the vile nature of it. It may not change policy, but does it change the discussions in the briefing rooms before you go out? Does it change the way perhaps you think of policy? Because we're in a tribal nation, it's very loud. So along those lines, I love George Brett. As a baseball player as a kid, Kansas City Royals. George Brett often missed 30 games in a season. Nobody thought it was load management, right? We live in a different time. Platforms call it out, and tickets are more expensive. So it does bother me. I'm a small town kid. I went once a year to see Downtown Freddie Brown, Gus Williams, Dennis Johnson, Jack Sikma. If they didn't play, that was the game I got. And I can see that little kid in Milwaukee, middle-class family go, and Giannis could play, but he doesn't. Is it a bigger I think it's a problem. Do you view it as being sort of platformed up by loud voices, or does the league look at this and think, our middle-class fans, they go to one game a year. They're not corporate stewards. And that they want to go and see their stars play. I think it's serious. Do you in the league think it is a problem that is something you want to solve?
We so much think it's a problem that in the last collective bargaining agreement, you may recall, we added some provisions to further incentivize players to play as many games as they possibly can by making them ineligible for certain awards, certain benefits if they fall below a certain level of games. Having said that, to your point, and I'm never going to shoot the messenger in terms of whether it's social media or the media. It's a real issue. And how can, for that family, for that one time that they're going to go see the Bucks or the Lakers or the Knicks or whatever else, I completely understand their point of view. The problem is, as much as we are an 82-game league, take LeBron, for example.
Okay.
LeBron has missed, I think, 3 games so far this season.
Yeah.
He's 40 years old. He has the most minutes in NBA history. And he's missed, I think, 3 out of, let's say, 37 games so far. I think that's incredible. Now, for the family that went to the Laker game of one of those 3 games, I understand their disappointment, and I know he does as well. It's with a season as long as we have. By the way, and whether it's because load management or an injury, it's still the same impact on that family. And all I can say is we've worked with our teams. We're working a lot on the science. I think, incidentally, you don't hear load management so much around the league anymore because I think we've dispelled that notion that it's somehow through some analytics or a computer program that on November 12th, you can make a decision that a player should sit out on December 20th, which is what was going on in the league. And in fact, my understanding, at least of the data that's come in so far, it may even be the case that some of the early season injuries are caused by players not having enough load. Because
Thank you.
Again, it's kind of fascinating. Like when I got to the league a little over 30 years ago, a lot of players would take the month of August and like literally go fishing.
Yeah.
They would chill out and they would like eat a little bit more, gain a little bit of weight. They'd come into training camp, and that's when you got back into shape, and you'd lose those pounds and you'd play your way and train and practice back into game shape. Now, there's hardly a player in the league that isn't working out every single day. Guys even go to the finals. They take a day off. They're back on the floor. But often it's specialized one-on-one training. It's weight room work. Whatever it is, it's not 5-on-5 basketball. And a lot of it, in fairness, these players, and that's what frustrates me too, because they don't take a day off. They're some of the hardest working athletes out there. But then they have it in their head that they're more likely to get injured if they're playing 5-on-5 basketball.
They're not. Yeah.
So, yeah. Right. So then they come back into training camp, and it's still not necessarily 5-on-5. There's the preseason. Again, minutes are limited. Then, boom, the regular season comes, and at least I can't say it's perfect. I know it's causation yet, but there's certainly a correlation early in the season that you see those guys. And it's interesting. It used to be we would hear from teams that you're going to injure our players if they play for USA basketball, the U.S. national team, the Olympic team,
right,
or the national teams, from the countries they're from. In fact, it's the opposite. We have fewer injuries, and maybe not surprisingly, from the guys who participate in competition over the summer, because the load is maintained. They're not overdoing it. But they come back, and there's that the consistency of the load, throughout the off season. So I think this is an area too where better data, AI is changing everything.
Yeah.
Where we're going to be in a position, I think, where we can convince the teams and convince the players that actually playing is in their interest. But unfortunately, we're never going to be able to completely solve that issue for that family that comes to that game and is disappointed. I will say, just lastly, and maybe it speaks a little bit to the data, that we're coming off last year. In the entire history of the NBA, it was our highest attendance. And I'm sure,
I read that.
Market, no doubt, the highest ticket prices too. So I will say, yes, there are fans disappointed, but people love the NBA experience. They love going to the games. I understand when there's a particular star you're interested, but also we've never been deeper in terms of the talent too. 450 players in the league.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a couple quick ones because I know you're a busy guy, much busier than me, and these can require shorter answers. So one of the things, the iPhone has changed everything. Our society is more caffeinated, more distracted, and more frenetic. Hockey regular season, baseball regular season, NBA regular season. It's just harder to get ratings. Events, UFC on Saturday, college football, NFL, Olympics, World Cup. Events get excellent ratings. It's not necessarily the fault of a league if there's a decline in Monday through Friday. And as I look and read stories about the decline of ratings, my take is it's an iPhone issue. It's not baseball until Ohtani and the Dodgers put up basically the best, most talented team ever. The Dodgers had great ratings. Is it just possible that, hey, we have contracts that limit the number of games we can be reduced to? We don't want to make one and done like college basketball. Is that your regular season ratings, they don't matter that much because I just saw your new TV deals, and that the media makes a bigger deal of the truth is we're good when it matters in May and June. And that's just a new world.
Yeah, you asked me to answer shorter, so I'll try to be. There's so much that can be said on this. So first of all, this season, just to set the record straight, we're up about 4% on ESPN and ABC. If you add TNT into the mix, we're down slightly, 3 or 4% for the season. That's our rating story so far. We're coming off last season where it was our highest regular season ratings in 4 years. But the issue is, especially for a sport like the NBA, where we have a very young fan base, young men,
yes,
young women, cable, as you know, and I'm sure it has an impact on your show as well, that since you last interviewed me, 5+ years, there's been yet another dramatic increase in the number of people who subscribe, I'll call it traditional television, cable, satellite television, or who watch traditional television. So much so that from a decade ago, it's like 50% fewer people watch traditional television. In fact, last year, the lines crossed. More people are now watching programming on streaming services than they are through legacy conventional television. So back to the iPhone. So those deals you talked about that we just entered into for next year, part of the reason I believe, in addition to the sport itself, that we're able to provide so much value is every one of those new partners, Disney and ESPN, NBC, Universal, Peacock, and of course, Amazon, provide their games through streaming. Maybe in the case of NBC, it's also broadcast, or Disney, ABC, and ESPN, but every single game beginning next season is going to be available on a streaming service. And then, burden on or onus on us then that we know now there's the opportunity to watch this programming on those screens, on those TVs they carry everywhere they go. But I think as a result, we have to up our game too. So they're adding more games of consequences, the colored floors you joked about before for the NBA Cup. So that gets people's attention. But beyond that, the really exciting thing to me about moving to streaming services, which are in essence internet television, you can add all kinds of incredible functionality, customization, personalization. People want to bet on games. They can do it. People want to buy merchandise. They're fascinated with a particular camera angle, or they want an audio feed that is directed at hardcore fans or casual fans. So I think, and this isn't just the case for the NBA, I think for all of the leagues, that the competition is that much greater than it used to be.
Yeah.
And so we have to do a better job engaging our fans in these games.
Okay, I promise. I know your PR people are probably saying, get Cowherd out of here.
I can ignore them.
Thank you. Okay, there's another one. So this really bothers Jason McIntyre. I think he really has been on this for 2 years. He's been very publicly critical of Barkley banging on the league. And my take is, I'll cut to the chase. Have you ever called that show's executives or Charles and said, Charles, could you not beat down on us every night? That there are those that believe it takes a negative tact or tone on a fairly consistent basis. I don't think it affects the ratings. I think they're an entertainment show, but I don't see the research you do. Have you contacted them at one point and said, you guys are a little negative?
Never, ever, ever. And the only contact I've ever had with them, and it would have been with Ernie, is occasionally Ernie and I will talk, and he'll say, we're going to be discussing some aspect of the salary cap or, the CBA, and he'll just give me a primer on what the rules are so that if somebody says something that is factually wrong, I'm in a position to correct them. But so that's just on facts, never on opinion. And I'll go one step further. I mean, as you know, we didn't continue our relationship with Turner Sports that produces inside the NBA.
Right. But
we just got a deal done with ESPN and Turner Sports to move that very show to ESPN and ABC.
Yeah.
And I'll go a step further. And I love Jason, by the way. So, Jason, thank you for being a fan. That I think in this case, they are unique. I think sometimes others who are more critical, I won't say names, but will get our equivalent of viewer mail. And people say, why is this guy commentating or announcing on the NBA when it seems that he doesn't even like the league? And I think that's a fair point if you think somebody's that negative.
Yeah.
And to me, there's always a tradition in the NFL where almost all the announcers, to me, seem to celebrate the game.
Yeah.
In the case of that panel, Charles, Kenny, Shaq, of course, Ernie, I always have the sense that when they are critical, it's your uncle at the Thanksgiving Day table. This is it's the family. They have the credibility.
Yeah.
And because I also hear, I don't call them, but I hear from players in the league or teams in the league or say, they're our partner. Like, why are they saying those things? And I think Charles is special. By the way, there's a reason that show has won close to, I think, 24 Emmys. And so I think it generates more interest in the league. And to the extent that next year that show will be featured on ESPN and ABC and more people will have the opportunity to see it, I think that's very positive for the league.
Well, this was fun, and I do appreciate you not eating during the interview because I love David, but it was a tuna sandwich every time he came on with me. And
that was his favorite.
Yeah, I found that. I discovered that over several years. A real pleasure. If you're ever in LA, I'd love to have you. I think this kind of stuff is important. I like to poke and prod, and I just appreciate you answering the questions.
Yeah, Colin, and I wish I had asked this at the top of the interview. How are you guys doing with everything that's going on out there?
I got to tell you, it's the most devastating thing I've ever seen. Los Angeles, as you know, is a community with a very diverse community. People come here and chase their dreams, and it feels like a lot of dreams have been shattered by a lot of really great people in a lot of industries. But I have seen giving at a level that is heartwarming. From outside of Los Angeles and in Los Angeles, people have opened their doors. Very encouraging by citizens of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'll just say, I was just with some of the Lakers and Clippers executives at some meetings. And first of all, I think, the Clippers at the Intuit Dome are going to do, a huge concert with the Azov family to raise money. In addition, I've been on the phone with JJ Redick. Of course, he lost his house. He was explaining to me how the community center, the rec center where his son was playing, burned to the ground. So the league is going to come up with a program with the Lakers and Clippers to help rebuild the community. So, again, the images are just horrific that we're seeing from the East Coast. So I'm very sorry.
Yeah, terrifying. But there's a lot of really good people in this state and this city. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, who presides, by the way, over 5 different sports leagues, NBA, WNBA, G League, NBA 2K, Basketball African League. Thank you so much for taking time for us. I told before the show, I said, listen, can I get 18 minutes? You gave us 29. I am indebted, and thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.